webcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate your time. We're going to give some last-minute stragglers just a few extra minutes here to gather in the space before we kick things off, but we'll get started shortly. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. A couple minutes past the hour here, but I appreciate your patience. We gathered a few more folks and wanted to give them that opportunity to join. So my name is John Carroll. I'm the Managing Director of U.S. Operations for Rodan Energy Solutions. Joining me today is Mr. Aaron Breidenbaugh. He is our Director of Regulatory and Government Affairs. And today we're going to be talking to you about the PJM capacity market. It's that time of year to consider enrollment, eligibility, qualification criteria, etc. So today we thought it'd be worthwhile to spend a few minutes talking through the various aspects of the capacity market, the auction, terminology, and then allow for Q&A from the audience to address specific issues and questions. What I'll do in terms of an operating procedure here is I will flip through a couple of the slides, talk through them, and then I'll pause. And Shamila will read out any questions that have been asked. And for orientation purposes, there is a question box, it's called, in which you can type your question. And when I pause at different points throughout the presentation, again, Aaron and I will field those questions. So once again, thanks for joining us today, spending a few minutes with us. And my thanks as well to our marketing team for helping coordinate this, for helping with the graphics and editing. And of course, thank you all for attending today. As an agenda, we'll step through, like I said, some of the basics of the market and start with the structure of the PJM capacity market. We'll talk about the difference between the base residual and any incremental auctions, how pricing is determined, what winter and summer balancing means, and how do we handle that in the market. What is a CSP, a curtailment service provider? And then lastly, how do you know you've found the right CSP? So like I mentioned in the first screen, what we're trying to do here is give you a framework of what this program, this market is all about. I hope to address most of your questions, so there won't be any questions, but these are the primary topics I believe that we'll be able to cover and hopefully answer all your questions. So moving right along, what would a webinar be without a word from our sponsor? and a sales pitch. So most of you in this call have a past experience with demand response, and that past experience can be used to validate any new experiences and vet new partners or providers. So one of the things I'll tell you up front, Rodan Energy Solutions, we are a full service provider, a very customer focused, customer centric organization, strategically focused in PJM in New York and throughout Canada. With over 20 years of experience, we have about 4.1 gigawatts currently under management, and we are focused on demand side solutions, demand response, peak load management, and a suite of software products that help you track peaks, a market dashboard that help you track critical information, really designed to help increase your energy IQ on the demand side. We also have a third line of business that's related, in which we will work to optimize and monetize any distributed energy resources that you might be considering installing or have installed in the past and is sitting idle other than for power outages. So that power systems engineering capability, that is a growing, rapidly growing field, as most of you know, and is one of our fastest growing offerings as well. So hopefully throughout this presentation, as we get through it, you'll understand where our differences are and really what it means to work with Rodan and how we can help you. All right, so let's dive right in and get into this. And I thought, a good place to start was to quote from PJM what demand response is. And I think most of you know this, but it's interesting the way they word this. So demand response is a consumer's ability to reduce electricity consumption when wholesale prices are high or the reliability of the electric grid is threatened. And it's really this reliability aspect that we're going to talk about today. So the basic concept of the capacity market is to provide PJM with various assets, and we'll talk about those assets in a few minutes, many different forms of which can be called to mitigate load constraints and or interruptions, thereby ensuring reliability. So that's really what we're going to focus on. And the capacity market is really built around something called the reliability pricing model. And you can see in this graphic here that really what we're trying to do is gather commitments from generation assets or any type of load interruption capable resource so that the market can rely on those commitments and ensure reliability of the grid. So those generation and load management resources can take various forms. It could be a natural gas generation asset, it could be a battery energy storage system, or it could be your ability to curtail your operations for a certain period of time, thereby providing that energy back to the grid. The reliability pricing model provides for a variety of information and data streams that is gathered for your benefit to provide better decision making. One aspect of a curtailment service provider and what they offer is a clear, concise representation of this data. So again, you can make better informed decisions. The reliability pricing model is based on a 3-year forward pricing scheme, and we'll talk about that in a few slides as well. That pricing varies by zone, and there are a number of zones throughout PJM. And as I'd mentioned, those resources then are committed 3 years forward. In a slide or two, we'll talk specifically about the auction, the base residual auction and the incremental auctions. And we have some dates on what's coming up and which delivery period is covered. But the general scheme is to provide that 3-year forward market for reliability purposes. So the auctions, as a segue, there's really 2 types. The first is the base residual auction, and the second one then are these incremental auctions. The eligibility for each is 100 kilowatts So that opens up the window to many, many customers in what they're enrolling, how they're curtailing. It really provides for a wide variety of options. The base residual auction is generally held every May, 3 years prior to the delivery period. Now, there's been an exception the last few years, and I'll talk about that in another slide, but generally every May, 3 years prior to delivery. And like I mentioned on the prior slide, the generation can be new or existing. It could be a load demand, an interruption, curtailment, could be an energy efficiency upgrade or a series of upgrades that can be enrolled. And of course, then aggregated resources. And we'll talk about that near the end from a curtailment service provider's perspective. What does that mean and how does that affect you? The incremental auctions then, once the base residual auction is done, as you get closer to the delivery period, 3 years, remember 3 years in advance, 3 incremental auctions are held 20, 10, and 3 months prior to the start of that delivery period. And this then allows PJM to really refine what's needed, what's available. Things have changed over the course of those 3 years. Maybe they need more, maybe they need less. And again, considering the zonal variations, perhaps some zones are higher, some zones are lower, what balancing needs to be done. That's really what the incremental auctions are meant to address. So it provides for increases and decreases in commitments to address the reliability of the grid. So let me pause there for a minute or two. Shamila, do we have any questions queued up?
At the moment, there are no questions.
Okay. That means I'm answering all the questions. That's good. Okay, an auction schedule. So everybody's looking at the table at the bottom, and that's fine. The important thing to remember here is due to some regulatory issues from a few years ago, the last auction, the last base residual auction was held in 2018, and that's for the current 21-22 delivery year. However, FERC recently allowed the base residual auction to resume in PJM, but playing catch up for the next several years. So this is where it gets a little bit interesting. In this calendar year, 2021, we'll actually have 2 auctions, one in May and one in December. So the one coming up in May, in a few months' time, will be for a delivery period of 22 and 23. Then 6 months, 6.5 months or so later in December, there'll be another auction, and that will be for the 23-24 delivery year. And then we'll be following the schedule from there. June of 22, January of 23, July of 23, we'll be caught up and back to the 3-year forward market that we talked about before. Generally speaking, enrollments for that particular auction, so for May and 21, enrollments are due April prior to the delivery period. So a curtailment service provider, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, will work over the next several months to procure contracts, define your curtailment plans, and verify eligibility and ensure proper enrollment prior to the delivery period. How is that pricing determined? So sellers, and that could be individuals, it could be a curtailment provider, it could be a curtailment service provider. They make capacity offers by zone. And those zones you can find, they're located on the PJM website. Again, minimum 100 kilowatts, but offers are made per zone. And based on those offers and transmission limits, pricing then will clear and may vary per zone, sometimes with higher prices in different geographic areas than elsewhere. And a lot of that is logical considering where a lot of the capacity is, the energy consumption is. One of the aspects of a curtailment service provider is to provide you with an outlook on what your savings might look like should you decide to enroll a generation asset or curtailment. And it's a quite simple calculation with the cleared price times the enrolled capacity. Paying attention to units, of course, but that will result in what your reservation payment would look like. And oftentimes during our proposal process and then a review of your interval meter data, we'll present an outlook for the next 3 years in terms of how much savings you'll generate by enrolling that asset or curtailing your energy consumption. And this pricing projections then, they allow for future planning and enrollment actions. So you then are smarter about how to curtail, when to curtail, if you should curtail, should you enroll that generation asset. All of this information is provided so that you can make smarter decisions. And of course, as we migrate here to the incremental auction, there's variations in load and supply that the incremental auction helps refine. Keeping in mind that the size in the market and in these auctions is generally much lower, so the pricing is also going to be very different than what was awarded during the base residual auction. So I talked about an awful lot there. Let me see, Shamiler, do we have any questions?
There are no questions at the moment.
Great. Winter and summer balancing. This is one of the most confusing aspects of the market. And as a provider, curtailment service provider, it's one of the subjects that we typically spend a lot of time educating our customers about. And really, as it implies, there are both winter loads and summer loads. And for many years, the PJM capacity market only permitted resources that could reduce load during the summer. So in 2015 and then by 2020, there was a change in that all loads would have to provide, all offers would have to provide year-round reduction. This is called capacity performance. Oftentimes, when we engage with customers, we'll talk through the ability to provide year-round, summer and winter. There are certain customers who cannot. And there's a great example at the bottom down there in terms of a ski resort versus a water park. Quite an obvious example. But in that case, that's where your curtailment service provider will work then to ensure that what we have enrolled for the summer matches what's enrolled for the winter. And this capacity performance, the CP, requires that the aggregators build such a balanced portfolio. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that a curtailment provider offers to the customer base. And that's a good segue into what is a curtailment service provider, CSP. So in effect, what we do is we identify and manage programs and opportunities based on your operational needs. So we engage early, we engage often, we learn your business, we try to understand where you're flexible, what uptime and downtime concerns you may have, all with a goal of maximizing savings, reducing your energy consumption, possibly addressing a corporate sustainability goal. And then we work to aggregate your load and balance the portfolio in your zone to meet that year-round performance requirement. That's the risk, part of the risk that a curtailment service provider takes. In addition to that, a curtailment service provider acts and interfaces with the PJM market system operators. So we handle settlements, we handle the enrollments, we handle the eligibility verification. There are certain credit requirements that a curtailment service provider must meet in order to enroll various generation or curtailment assets. So that risk is also borne by the CSP. The idea being that it's easier for you to participate and less intrusive to participate and support the reliability of the grid. Curtailment service providers also try to insulate customers, our customers, from any penalties that might occur should there be an underperformance scenario. And this reflects back to earlier comments about balancing. So we work closely with our customers, we track performance during curtailment events, and then we'll report back through various means, perhaps a savings report, a phone call, a screenshot of how the facility load actually curtailed during the curtailment window. There's a variety of ways we'll report back and then work closely with you to understand if and why there was an underperformance. Perhaps that happened to be an unusual day in the manufacturing operations and you were unable to reduce what your commitment stipulated. Then we work with you, we try to provide further education and make decisions about any penalties and work with PJM to resolve those issues. The last one here is understanding and improving PJM rules and offering strategic advice. This is probably one of the most important aspects of what a CSP provides, that strategic advice. Similar to prior experiences, I'm sure you can all lament and opine on poor customer service, poor support, lower intelligence or information availability. Really what we try to do is offer insights into the market that are not readily available to the customer base. So that strategic advice begins with the curtailment plan, the proposal phase, ensuring you're educated and understand what the requirements are in the market, what your payments would be, when the payments would occur. That's a big part of what a curtailment service provider offers. How do you know you've found the right CSP? Well, you can probably match each one of these to the prior slide. But again, does your CSP understand your strategic sustainment and energy savings goals? This, like I said, begins early in the process in identifying what you're curtailing, what you're enrolling, what your uptime, downtime requirements are, corporate sustainment goals. This is all a part of the qualification process early on. Does your CSP understand your operation and can they optimize based on your flexibilities? So there are other programs in PJM, not just the capacity market. There are ancillary products that perhaps might be better suited to your individual operations. This is all part of understanding how flexible you can be and when you can offer in. The right CSP will also work with you to develop a curtailment plan. And this is not a complex plan, but it requires a lot of investigative discussions, your input, the input of your operations team, your finance team, your engineering team. You have corporate goals that you need to meet. In some cases, they're hourly. In some cases, they're daily or monthly. So this curtailment plan takes a look at all that, makes certain assumptions. What if there was a 4-hour curtailment in the middle of a work day during your peak season? And then provides you with a look into what your savings return would look like for that break so that you now can compare. Your CSP is also, should be, a world-class customer-focused organization, providing year-round care, providing access to real people through a network operations center or NOC or an energy analyst. This is an important part of increasing your energy IQ. We believe at Rodan, the smarter you are, the better prepared we are for any changes in the market. The right CSP also participates in various stakeholder processes and regulatory proceedings. Joining me on the call today, I mentioned earlier, is our Director of Regulatory Affairs, Aaron. He attends these meetings. He provides input to these meetings. He's part of various lobbying groups in these meetings, and then provides that information to not just our internal team, but is often on calls with our customers to help ensure that they're educated, know what revenue opportunities are available to them, and then help them identify the right revenue opportunities that match that curtailment plan we built. Shamila, any questions there?
I have a few questions.
Okay.
Yep. So the first one, what are the penalties for non-compliance with a PJM event or a test event?
Aaron, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, sure. And greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I think probably the most salient answer from the context of somebody who might be participating in this program is that for you, the answer is none. That is one of, as John indicated earlier, one of the main roles that a curtailment service provider plays is to use I've heard it referred to as the law of large numbers. So there's always going to be participants who, for whatever reason, business priorities or equipment that might be down, are not able to reduce their load when called upon to do so. By the same token, there's also always going to be participants who can curtail more than what they need to do. And offsetting the one with the other allows the good CSPs to allow you to participate and not face the substantial penalties that if you were participating on your own behalf, you would face on your own. Now, the other answer is that there are significant penalties to not being there when called upon to do so. Capacity is making a forward commitment to be there when PJM needs you for reliability purposes. And if you're not there, there are costs associated with that. And so we, though, are the ones that face those penalties. And it's our job to make sure that our portfolio of customers who are participating is sufficient to allow us to minimize the penalties that we face, hopefully none at all. But in any event, the way that we structure our deals with customers is such that you will not face penalties by failure to participate. If, on the other hand, you repeatedly are unable to participate, then the response would be to remove you with loving kindness from our portfolio, and it may be that you need to pursue other opportunities than demand response.
Okay.
Thanks, Aaron.
The second question, what if my load is summer-based due to AC? What is my downside?
So if under the new capacity performance model that goes into effect for the first time this year, there are no other alternatives. Whoever participates, the resource base that participates rather, is required to offer reductions year-round. And so if you have a resource that is incapable of doing that, one of the things your CSP needs to do is match you up with other providers who can. And essentially, you're better off if you can do it year-round, because then you'll be entitled to keep all of the revenues for each megawatt that is committed into the market. If we have to match you with someone else, the proverbial water park to your ski resort or vice versa, then the revenues need to be split between those participants because there's only particular compensation for a year-round product. I don't know if that answers the question. It sounded like that was the question that was being asked.
Yeah, I think so, Aaron. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, Shamila?
Yep, two more. Do you provide a DR dashboard?
So we do. We call it a DR portal, and that portal provides you with a track of your facilities usage versus your baseline. We also have other products, peak tracking products, and a market dashboard, each of which offer various forms of information and capabilities. But any one of those is available for demonstration. We own the products. They are not provided by a third party. And like I said, happy to demonstrate any of those if needed.
Okay, my last question. Can you provide real-time insight into our load or at the utility level?
Real-time insight into their load. So one of the things we do, I just mentioned in the DR portal, we do track facility usage. I'm assuming that's what they mean. So that's real time, and then we provide a tool that will plot that versus your baseline. We also provide a peak tracking tool then that would overlay forecasted peaks from the utility, if need be, or from the ISO. So I think that's where they're headed with the question, Shamila.
Okay.
We also provide a notification service, what we call peak notifications, that would then, based on the market and the location you're in, would provide you with an email, a text message, a phone call, month ahead, day ahead, month ahead, week ahead, day ahead, day of, real-time advice and personal contact to upcoming curtailment events, peaking events, all of which is viewable through the portal that I mentioned before.
Okay, those are my questions.
Okay, hopefully that answered that last one. Okay, so that was a good place to break. I would say we've answered some good questions here. What can a curtailment provider, what should they provide to you? How do you know you found the right one? And I'll close more or less here with the idea that your curtailment provider should be a trusted energy advisor. You should be able to reach out and touch people in that organization over the phone, not just email and text. You should have regular care and feeding from that organization, contact with their NOC, savings reports, perhaps performance reports, depending on a software tool that you're using. If you're not getting that kind of care, my advice would be to reach out, give us a call. We'll touch base with you as well and fill you in on how we can do things a little bit differently and a little better for you. So with that, there's my contact details, Aaron's as well. We will be reaching out to you. I know a mailer will follow up here as well that will have a link to this video and the slide deck. So that's for you. Appreciate your attendance. But once we reach out, if you've got further questions, specific application questions, we're happy to talk through it and work towards a curtailment plan for you. Shamila, any last questions pop up?
No questions right now.
Okay. Then folks, thank you all for attending. If there are any other questions, please shoot us an email, give me a call. We're happy to help at any time, but I do appreciate your time this afternoon and enjoy the rest of the day.